Humans use this to reproduce? The alien woman said in pure shock. Captain David Grant stood at the helm of the Terra Nova, staring out into the endless expanse of space. The ship's quiet hum was the only sound breaking the silence of the observation deck. A seasoned leader of the Terran exploration fleet, David had seen many strange worlds and met many alien species, but something about this mission felt different. This planet, codenamed Zeta 9, was unlike anything they had encountered before. Orbiting a distant star, the planet was lush, with thick forests, vast oceans, and a breathable atmosphere. It was a paradise untouched by civilization. "All systems are clear, Captain," his first officer, Lieutenant Alina Carter, called out from the console. Her voice was calm but laced with an edge of excitement. "We've detected signs of life on the surface. It's unusual, not like anything we've encountered so far." David nodded. He had heard about the strange readings, but it was now up to the crew to investigate. The Terran exploration fleet had been on a mission to explore new star systems, seeking out potential allies and new resources for humanity. This was a rare find, a planet that could potentially support life, and not just any life, but intelligent life. "We're going down," David said, his voice firm. "Prepare the team." Within minutes, the Terra Nova descended into the atmosphere of Zeta 9. The crew donned their environmental suits, ready to step onto a new world. The shuttle doors opened, revealing a dense, jungle-like environment. The air was thick with moisture, and the ground was soft beneath their boots. The planet was alive with the sounds of alien creatures, some of which David had never heard before. "Stay alert," David said as he led the team through the thick foliage. The trees here were enormous, towering hundreds of feet into the sky. Their trunks were smooth, almost glass-like, and their leaves shimmered in the dim light. The crew moved cautiously, scanning the area for any signs of life. As they ventured deeper into the jungle, something caught David's eye, a flash of movement in the distance. He raised a hand, signaling the team to stop. His eyes narrowed as he focused on the figure moving through the trees. It wasn't an animal. It was too tall, too humanoid. "Did you see that?" Alina asked, her voice low. "There's something out there." David nodded. "It's an alien. Stay close." They moved toward the figure, careful not to make a sound. The figure was tall, with an elegant posture, and its skin was a pale shade of blue, almost translucent in the dim light. As they got closer, David could see that it was a woman, her features sharp and otherworldly. Her hair was long and silver, flowing like strands of liquid metal. She was wearing what appeared to be a form of armor, sleek and alien, designed for protection in the harsh environment of the jungle. The woman didn't seem to notice them at first, but as they stepped closer, she turned abruptly, her eyes locking with David's. There was a moment of silence between them, as if both were trying to process the other's presence. The woman's expression was one of confusion, but also of caution. "Who are you?" the woman asked, her voice musical, yet laced with an unmistakable note of suspicion. David stepped forward, raising his hand in a peaceful gesture. "We are humans. My name is Captain David Grant, and this is my crew. We come in peace." The woman's eyes widened at the mention of the word human. She took a step back, her body language tense. "Humans," she repeated as if testing the word. "You are like us." David hesitated. "We are human. We come from Earth." The woman stared at him for a long moment before shaking her head. "No, that can't be. You are nothing like us. You are so different." "We are explorers," David explained. "We've been traveling through space looking for new life, new civilizations. We didn't know anyone lived here. We didn't mean to invade." The woman's expression softened, but there was still a clear wariness in her eyes. She studied David for a moment before speaking again. "You don't belong here. Your kind is wrong." David was taken aback. "Wrong. What do you mean?" The woman shook her head again, her gaze now drifting toward the sky. "I don't know how to explain it. You are primitive. You should not be here. You have not evolved to be like us." David raised an eyebrow. "Like you? What do you mean?" "We're not so different." She turned her eyes back to him. "You still reproduce?" she asked, almost incredulously. David blinked. The question caught him off guard. "Reproduce? Of course we do, like all living things, through biology, through natural means." The woman's eyes went wide, her mouth dropping open in shock. "What? You use that to reproduce? You?" She stopped herself, shaking her head in disbelief. "That is incomprehensible. You do it in the natural way?" David was stunned. He wasn't sure how to respond. The woman was clearly shocked, but he didn't understand why. Yes, he said slowly. We do. Humans reproduce through natural biological processes. It's how life works on our planet. The woman looked at him as if he had just told her something impossible. That's barbaric, primitive. She seemed to struggle to find words. You use that to create life, but why not control it? Why not engineer your offspring, create the perfect being without those instincts? David felt a strange pang of frustration. Because that's the way we are, he said, his voice a little firmer now. Humans believe in emotions, in connections. We don't just create life for the sake of control. We form relationships, bonds with one another. Reproduction is part of that. It's human. The woman took a step back, her expression still one of disbelief. But why? Why go through such a messy process? It makes no sense. You're so unpredictable, so raw. David looked around at the other crew members who were clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. He turned his attention back to the woman, his voice softer now. We don't think of it as messy. We think of it as beautiful. It's part of who we are. The woman stared at him for a long time, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to understand. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quiet but with an edge of something new, something like respect. Perhaps I don't understand you, but I need to learn more. I need to understand why you live this way. David nodded. I can show you. We can help you understand. But you have to trust us. The woman hesitated, her mind clearly torn. After a long pause, she nodded slowly. I will try, but I still cannot understand how you live like this. There must be more to it. David smiled, though it was a weary smile. Maybe you'll understand in time, but for now we need to get to safety. It's not safe out here. The woman nodded, still looking uncertain, but she seemed willing to trust David, at least for the moment. As Captain David Grant and the crew led Elara through the dense, lush jungle of Zeta 9, there was a strange quiet between them. The alien woman walked beside him, her eyes scanning everything with a mixture of fascination and disbelief. The planet seemed to pulse with life, but to Elara everything felt wrong. She had never seen anything like this, the untamed, uncontrolled environment, the wildness of it all. The contrast between her species' sterile, controlled world and this one was jarring. David noticed the discomfort in Elara's posture. She was trying to process everything at once, and it was clear that she was struggling. Her people, the Lorathi, were highly advanced, capable of controlling their environment to such an extent that they had nearly eliminated all elements of unpredictability. The idea that humans, living beings like herself, would embrace the chaotic, messy process of reproduction had shaken her to her core. How did you come to be? Elara's voice broke the silence, her words slow and careful. You, humans, use that. That method to create life? David sighed, glancing over at her. Yes, we don't control it. We let nature take its course. Elara shook her head as though she couldn't quite understand. But why? Your kind is so unpredictable. So, she paused, searching for the right word. So emotional, how can you trust such a process? David stopped walking for a moment, turning to face her. It's not about control, he said gently. It's about connection, about love. Emotions are a part of us. Our relationships are built on those emotions. That's why we don't try to control everything. Life is unpredictable, yes, but that's what makes it beautiful. Elara's gaze shifted, and she looked away, deep in thought. She seemed to be wrestling with the concept, trying to make sense of something that was so alien to her. Her species did not experience emotions in the same way humans did. For the Lorathi, emotions were suppressed, carefully managed through genetic engineering and artificial reproduction. They had perfected their species, eliminating what they viewed as weaknesses, things like love, lust, and the unpredictability of natural reproduction. Elara had never known a world where life was anything other than controlled. Her people had mastered the art of creating perfect beings, each one engineered to serve a specific purpose. Reproduction was no longer a messy process. It was a clean, sterile procedure, guided by science. But now, standing in the middle of this wild, untamed jungle with humans who embraced the very chaos she had been taught to fear, she was beginning to question everything she had ever known. They reached the clearing where the Terra Nova shuttle was waiting. David turned to Elara, watching her closely. Come on, we're not far from the ship. We can talk more there. Elara nodded, but she didn't move right away. She was still processing, still struggling to understand the humans and their strange way of life. She had so many questions, but the answers weren't coming easily. Her mind kept going back to what David had said about connection and emotions. How could humans trust something so fragile. The idea of love, of trusting another being enough to allow such vulnerability, was beyond her comprehension. When they finally reached the shuttle, Elara hesitated before entering. She had never been in a human-made craft before. Her people's ships were sleek, biologically engineered, and perfectly adapted to their needs. The shuttle that David's crew had flown in, however, seemed crude by comparison. The metal exterior, the mechanical systems, the strange smells, all of it was unfamiliar to her. It felt primitive. "Don't worry," David said, noticing her hesitation. "It's safe. It may not look like much, but it gets the job done." Elara stepped inside, her movements cautious. The interior of the shuttle was crowded with humans, most of whom gave her curious looks but remained silent. They had seen alien species before, but Elara's appearance was unlike anything they had encountered. Her skin shimmered with a pale blue glow, and her eyes were large and black, the irises swirling like liquid. She looked almost ethereal, like something out of a dream. David led her to one of the seats and gestured for her to sit. "Make yourself comfortable. We'll be heading back to the Terra Nova soon." Elara sat, but she didn't relax. She remained stiff, her eyes constantly scanning the shuttle. She was still trying to make sense of everything, still unsure of what to think about these humans. Their ways were so different from hers. They lived in chaos in a world where emotions ruled, and yet they survived. They thrived. As the shuttle ascended from the planet's surface, Elara could feel the weight of the atmosphere change. The cool, dense air of the jungle was replaced by the sterile, controlled environment of the shuttle. It was a relief, but also a reminder of the world she had come from, a world where everything was planned, calculated, and devoid of emotion. David sat next to her, his eyes on the view screen as they ascended into the void of space. "You said you didn't understand human reproduction. What do you know about how your species creates life?" Elara's gaze turned to him, her eyes narrowing slightly. She seemed to choose her words carefully. "Our people don't reproduce the way you do," she began. "We don't, mate, we don't have physical relationships. Instead, we create life through controlled genetic engineering. We design our offspring, choosing their traits, their abilities. We no longer rely on biology to reproduce. It is all calculated, deliberate. We don't allow ourselves to be ruled by instincts." David listened intently, his brow furrowing. "But what about relationships? What about love? Do you feel anything for your family, for the people around you?" Elara was quiet for a long time, as if she had never truly considered the question before. I don't know," she said slowly. "We care for one another, of course, but love, that is a foreign concept to us. We are not meant to be distracted by such things. We are designed to function to serve our purpose." David's face softened, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "You've never known love?" Elara shook her head. "No, we don't have time for such things. Our species is built on efficiency, on perfection. We don't have the luxury of emotion." David thought about that for a moment. "I can't imagine living without it, without feeling something for the people around you." Elara didn't respond immediately. She was thinking, trying to understand this human perspective. For the first time, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt before, curiosity. She wondered what it would be like to experience emotions like humans did. To care for someone not because it was logical, but because it was natural. As they neared the Terra Nova, David glanced over at Elara. "Maybe you'll see things differently once you spend more time with us. We don't have everything figured out, but we've learned to live with the mess, the chaos." Elara didn't say anything, but her eyes lingered on him, thoughtful. She had a lot to learn. And perhaps, just perhaps, she could learn to understand the beauty in humanity's flaws. The Terra Nova was quiet as it sailed through the stars, heading back to the safety of the human fleet. The crew had settled into their usual routines, though there was an air of curiosity about Elara. She had not said much since the shuttle ride, and the crew, though friendly, kept their distance, unsure of how to interact with the alien woman. David, however, had grown accustomed to her presence. He found himself drawn to her, eager to learn more about her people and the strange, complex world she came from. Elara, for her part, seemed lost in thought. She spent most of her time in her quarters, staring out of the small window, her gaze fixed on the stars. David had tried to engage her in conversation, but each time she had either been too distracted or too reluctant to talk. It was clear that she was struggling to understand everything she had learned about humanity in such a short time. Her mind was full of questions questions about love, about life, and most of all, about human reproduction. One evening, David found Elara standing alone on the observation deck, staring out into space. The faint glow of the stars illuminated her face, making her look almost otherworldly. He approached quietly, unsure of how to begin. "How are you feeling?" David asked gently, breaking the silence. Elara turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "I don't know," she replied slowly. "Everything is overwhelming. I've never known a world like this. Your species. You live in chaos. You live by emotions, by instinct." David nodded, stepping closer. "Yeah, that's true. We're not perfect, but that's what makes us who we are. We rely on our emotions, on our connections with others." Elara looked at him with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. "But how can you trust something so unpredictable? How can you trust emotions when they can be so easily manipulated?" David smiled softly. "That's the thing about humans. We don't always trust emotions, but we don't try to suppress them either. We let ourselves feel what we feel, even if it's difficult, even if it hurts." Elara frowned, her brow furrowing. "I don't understand. In my world, emotions are seen as weaknesses. We've been taught to suppress them, to control everything. That's why we don't reproduce the way you do. We don't allow ourselves to be ruled by instincts." David paused, considering her words. "I understand that you're trying to protect your people from chaos, but what if emotions are not weaknesses? What if they make us stronger?" Elara turned away, her gaze drifting back to the stars. I don't know what to believe anymore." David felt a pang of sympathy. He knew Elara was struggling, not just with her understanding of human reproduction, but with everything she had been taught about life. He wasn't sure how to help her, but he felt a strong desire to try. "You don't have to understand everything right now," David said, his voice soft. "Maybe it's something you'll come to understand over time." Elara turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "You think I can learn to trust emotions, to understand them?" David shrugged. "I think it's possible. Emotions aren't something you can control or measure, they just happen, but maybe that's the beauty of it. The unpredictability. It makes life more real, more meaningful." Elara was silent for a long time, her thoughts clearly racing. David gave her the space she needed, watching as her mind worked through everything he had said. He didn't know what would happen, or if she would ever fully understand the way humans lived. But he hoped that, in time, she would find some peace in her new understanding. The next few days passed in a blur. Elara began to spend more time with the crew, though she was still distant and unsure. David invited her to join them for meals, but she always seemed to prefer solitude, retreating to her quarters after brief, awkward conversations. She seemed to be processing everything slowly, like a puzzle she was trying to put together, but the pieces weren't fitting. One day, as David was walking through the halls of the ship, he found Elara standing by one of the observation windows again. This time, she wasn't staring out at the stars, but at the crew as they worked in the ship's command center. Her expression was one of deep concentration, as if she was studying the humans around her. David approached cautiously, not wanting to startle her. "What's on your mind?" Elara didn't turn to face him right away. She seemed lost in thought, her eyes fixed on the bustling crew members below. "I've been thinking," she said slowly, "about your species, about your emotions, about your relationships." David raised an eyebrow, curious. "What about them?" Elara finally turned to him, her eyes filled with an intensity he hadn't seen before. "You say that your emotions make you stronger, but what if they make you weaker? What if they cloud your judgment, cause you to make mistakes?" David smiled, his voice gentle. "That's a risk we take, but we also have something that helps us balance it out, our connections to each other. We look out for each other, we help each other through the tough times, and yeah, sometimes emotions can lead us to make mistakes. But they also lead us to make the right choices, to do what's best for the people we care about." Elara was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. "I've never had to rely on anyone like that. We've always been taught to rely on ourselves, to be self-sufficient." Emotions were never part of the equation. David's expression softened. "That sounds lonely." Elara looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "It's not loneliness, it's just efficiency. We're designed to work together, but not to feel for one another. Emotions complicate things." David could see that she was torn. The idea of relying on others, of opening herself up to the possibility of emotional connection, was foreign to her. But there was something in her eyes, a spark of curiosity, a flicker of something more, that told him she was starting to understand in her own way. Maybe emotions do complicate things, David said quietly, but they also make life worth living. Without them, we're just going through the motions. It's the love, the pain, the joy, that's what makes life real. Ilara stared at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then finally she nodded slowly. Maybe I'm starting to see that. But I don't know if I can ever truly understand it. David smiled. You don't have to understand everything right away, just take it one step at a time. Ilara remained silent for a moment, then looked back out at the crew below. I will try. I want to understand. But I need time. David gave her a reassuring nod. Take all the time you need. We're in this together. The days aboard the Terra Nova had become a strange mix of routine and quiet contemplation. Captain David Grant and his crew continued their exploration, but there was a sense that everything had shifted. Ilara's presence aboard the ship had begun to change not only the way the crew interacted with her, but also the way they thought about the world, about emotions, and about what it meant to be human. David, especially, found himself thinking about their conversations more and more. Ilara was no longer just a mystery to him. She had become a person with her own struggles, her own doubts. The more he saw her, the more he realized how different her world was from his, and how deeply that difference affected her. Ilara, for her part, seemed more at ease with the crew, though she was still distant. She had begun to engage with them in small ways, asking questions, observing their interactions, but there was always an underlying tension. She was learning, but the process was slow. Her curiosity was undeniable, but it was clear she was fighting against years of ingrained beliefs about the way life should be lived. One afternoon, as the ship continued its journey through space, David found Ilara sitting alone in the mess hall, her gaze fixed on a datapad. She seemed to be absorbed in something, her eyes scanning the screen as she read. He hesitated for a moment before approaching her. It was rare that she spent time with anyone outside of their conversations, and he wondered what was going through her mind now. Ilara, David said, his voice soft, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, her eyes meeting his. There was a brief moment of silence before she set the datapad down on the table. Captain, she said, her voice still somewhat distant but warmer than it had been before. I've been reading more about your species, about human history, your culture, your way of life. David sat down across from her, intrigued. What have you learned? Ilara's eyes narrowed slightly as she thought. I've learned that humans are complex. You do things that seem illogical to me. You follow emotions, instincts, rather than reason. But there is something else I've noticed, something that I didn't understand before. Despite all the chaos, despite the unpredictability, you find a way to survive. You make it work. David smiled. That's one way to put it. We don't always get it right, but we keep going. We adapt. That's what makes us resilient. Ilara was silent for a moment, her fingers drumming softly on the table. I'm still trying to understand how you live this way. How you allow yourselves to feel, to be vulnerable. You say it's a strength, but it seems like a weakness to me. Why would you put yourselves at risk like that? David leaned back in his chair, thinking about her question. I guess it's because for us the risk is worth it. We live, we love, we fight, we fail, and through all of it we grow. We're not perfect, but we're real. There's something beautiful about that. Ilara's eyes searched his face as though she was trying to understand him on a deeper level. And the way you reproduce. That too seems so unnecessary. Why not control it like we do? Why leave it to chance? David's expression softened, the familiar conversation coming up again. I don't think it's unnecessary. For us, reproduction is about more than just creating life. It's about connection. When a man and a woman come together to create a child, it's not just about biology. It's about love, about trust. It's the beginning of a new life, a new connection. That's something we value. Ilara looked down at the table, deep in thought. I think I'm beginning to understand, she said quietly, but I still don't know if I could ever live like you do. David smiled gently. You don't have to live exactly like us, Ilara, but maybe you can start by seeing the value in the connections you have. In the people around you, you don't have to control everything. Sometimes it's okay to let go. Ilara met his gaze, and for the first time there was a flicker of something new in her eyes, something that wasn't just confusion or judgment. It was a mixture of curiosity and understanding. Maybe you're right, she said softly. Maybe there's something to this, living freely. The next few days were filled with small changes. Ilara spent more time with the crew, learning about their lives, their stories, and their emotions. She began to observe human relationships more closely, watching how the crew interacted, how they cared for each other, how they supported one another in times of need. One evening, as David was walking down the hallway, he overheard a conversation between Elara and Elena Carter, the first officer. Elena had always been one of the crew members most eager to talk to Elara, trying to bridge the gap between their two worlds. "I think I'm starting to see what you mean," Elara said, her voice thoughtful. "I still don't fully understand it, but I see how your emotions drive you, how they motivate you to act to protect the ones you care about. That's something my people don't have." Elena smiled. "It's not always easy, though. Emotions can lead to pain, to mistakes, but they can also lead to incredible moments of connection, of love. It's a messy, unpredictable thing, but it's ours." Elara was silent for a moment. "I don't know if I'm ready to embrace it fully," she admitted, "but I think I can learn to appreciate it, to understand why it's so important to you." David smiled to himself, listening from a distance. It was small, but it was progress. Elara was beginning to open up, to see beyond the limitations of her own people's beliefs. She was starting to understand that there was value in humanity's unpredictability, in its emotions, and in its imperfections. Later that day, as the Terra Nova continued its journey through space, the ship's sensors picked up a strange anomaly. It was a faint signal coming from a nearby asteroid field. David called a meeting in the command center to discuss their next steps. "This could be an opportunity for us to explore further," David said, his eyes scanning the data. "It might be a distress signal, or it could be something else entirely. We'll need to investigate." Elara stood at the back of the room, listening intently. She hadn't said much during the meeting, but it was clear that she was still processing everything, still trying to find her place among humans, still learning. "I'll go with you," Elara said suddenly, her voice firm. David turned to her, surprised. "Are you sure?" Elara nodded. "I want to help. I want to understand more. I want to see the world through your eyes, Captain. I want to learn not just about your species, but about how you live, how you think. I've been trying to do that for days now, but I need to see it firsthand." David met her gaze and smiled. "All right, then. Let's go see what this signal is about." As the crew prepared to investigate the anomaly, Elara's presence among them felt different. She was no longer just a passive observer. She was becoming part of the team, part of the human experience. And for the first time, David felt that maybe, just maybe, Elara had begun to understand what it meant to live freely, to embrace the messiness and beauty of life. The Terra Nova moved silently through space, its engines humbling in the vast emptiness around them. Captain David Grant stood at the command center, gazing at the view screen, which displayed a map of the asteroid field ahead. The faint signal they had detected earlier was now stronger, more urgent. Whatever it was getting closer. "Prepare the crew," David said, his voice steady. "We're going in." Beside him, Elara stood, her posture straight, her eyes focused on the data coming in. Since her decision to join the investigation, she had been more present among the crew, becoming an active participant rather than just a bystander. She had asked to be included, to learn more about the human experience, and David had noticed a subtle shift in her. She was no longer just trying to understand, she was becoming part of it. "I've never seen a signal like this before," Elena Carter, the first officer, said, her fingers moving quickly over the control panel. "It's erratic, like it's not coming from a single source." "Could be a distress call," David replied, glancing at Elara, "or something else. We'll find out soon enough." The asteroid field ahead was dense, a labyrinth of rock and debris. The crew had to maneuver carefully, the ship's sensors working overtime to detect any hidden dangers. Elara observed their actions closely, taking mental notes of their methods. She had learned much about the humans, but this was something different. It wasn't just their emotions that fascinated her now. It was their ability to adapt, to think quickly, and to take risks. It was all part of the unpredictability she had come to admire. As the ship moved deeper into the field, the signal grew stronger. It wasn't coming from one specific location, but it was clear that it was leading them somewhere. Elara felt a twinge of curiosity, something she hadn't fully embraced before. She was eager to see what they would find. "We're almost there," David said, his voice calm. "Everyone stay alert." The ship carefully navigated the asteroid field, the massive rocks looming on all sides. For a moment, everything seemed still, quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the Terra Nova's engines and the occasional beep from the navigation system. Ilara felt the weight of the silence settle over her. It was different from her own world where everything was controlled, predictable. Here, everything felt raw, chaotic, and yet there was a strange beauty to it. Then suddenly the signal came through loud and clear and the entire crew froze. "It's coming from a nearby asteroid," Elena said, her fingers flying over the controls. "There's something there. I'm pinpointing the location now." David's eyes narrowed. "Prepare for landing." "We're going in." The Terra Nova slowly descended toward the asteroid, the ship's thrusters carefully adjusting to the unstable gravity of the rock. The crew watched as the screen displayed an image of the surface, rough, jagged, and covered in deep craters. There was nothing extraordinary about it at first glance, but the signal was undeniable. Something was hidden there, something important. Ilara stood beside David, her mind racing. She had spent days observing the humans, learning their ways, but this was something new. It was one thing to talk about emotions, about connections, but this was something else. It was about action, about stepping into the unknown. As the ship touched down, the crew quickly prepared their gear, donning their suits and securing their weapons. Ilara hesitated for a moment, then followed them, her curiosity outweighing her uncertainty. The hatch opened, and the crew stepped onto the cold, rocky surface of the asteroid. The air was thin, almost non-existent, but their suits provided the necessary protection. The ground beneath their feet was uneven, and the gravity was weak, making every step feel uncertain. David led the way, his eyes scanning the terrain as the crew followed. They moved carefully, cautious of any potential danger. Ilara walked beside David, her mind focused on the strange feeling she had. The signal was getting stronger, but there was something else, something more. It was almost as if the asteroid itself was calling to her. "Stay close," David said over the comms. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet." They continued on for what felt like hours, making their way through a series of craters and ravines. The silence of the asteroid field was deafening, broken only by the occasional crunch of their boots on the rocky surface. Ilara couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This was the unknown, and it was exhilarating in a way she hadn't expected. Then, as they rounded a bend in the asteroid's surface, they saw it. A massive structure, half buried in the rock, its edges sharp and angular. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. It seemed to pulse with a strange energy as if it were alive. The signal was coming from within. David stopped, his gaze fixed on the structure. "What is this?" Ilara stepped forward, her eyes wide. "It's alien. But not like anything I've ever seen." The structure was clearly ancient, its surface worn by time and exposure to the harsh conditions of space. Yet there was something about it that felt familiar. Ilara couldn't explain it, but she had the strangest feeling that it was connected to her in some way, to her people. "Let's get inside," David said, his voice firm. "We need to find out what this is." The crew approached cautiously, making their way through the rubble and debris that surrounded the entrance. The air grew colder as they drew nearer, and Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. She wasn't afraid exactly, but something about the place unsettled her. As they entered the structure, the interior was just as strange as the outside. The walls were smooth, almost metallic, and they seemed to shimmer in the dim light. It was clear that the technology was advanced, but there was no sign of any living beings. No signs of recent activity. It was as though this place had been abandoned for centuries. "We need to find the source of the signal," Elena said, her voice tense. "It's coming from deeper inside," David nodded. "Let's move." They followed the signal, their steps echoing in the empty halls. The deeper they went, the more disorienting the structure became. The walls seemed to shift, as if the space itself was alive, adapting to their presence. It was like walking through a maze that didn't make sense, a place where the very laws of physics seemed to bend and twist. Finally, they reached a chamber at the heart of the structure. It was massive, filled with strange machines and devices, their purpose unclear. In the center of the room, a glowing orb pulsed with light, emitting a faint hum that resonated through the air. The signal was coming from the orb. David stepped forward, his gaze fixed on it. "What is this?" Ilara moved closer, her eyes drawn to the orb. She could feel its power, its energy, and it was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was familiar but also foreign. It felt ancient. This is beyond anything my people have ever encountered," she said softly. "But I think it's connected to us." David turned to her, his brow furrowed. What do you mean? Elara hesitated, then took a deep breath. Our species has been engineered for millennia. We control everything. Our lives, our purpose, our reproduction. But I think this technology, this energy, was meant to break that control. It was meant to remind us of the unpredictability of life, to show us that we cannot control everything. David watched her closely, his expression thoughtful. You're saying this technology could change everything, for your people? Elara nodded slowly. Yes, it's not just a machine, it's a message. A reminder that there is more to life than control, more than perfection. There's chaos, there's beauty in the unknown. David turned to the orb, his eyes narrowing. And how do we stop it from falling into the wrong hands? Elara looked at him, a deep understanding passing between them. We protect it, we share it, but we must be careful. Some things can't be controlled, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be respected. David nodded, his resolve firm. Then we'll make sure it's safe for both our people. The crew stood there in silence, the weight of their discovery settling in. Elara had come to understand something profound about humanity. It wasn't about control, about perfection. It was about embracing the unknown, the unpredictable, and finding beauty in the chaos. It was something she had never fully understood until now. As the Terra Nova prepared to leave the asteroid field, Elara stood beside David, looking out at the vast emptiness of space. She had learned so much, but the journey wasn't over. There was still much to understand, much to explore. But for the first time, she felt that she was ready. The stars stretched out before them, a symbol of all the possibilities that lay ahead. Elara had learned to embrace the uncertainty of life, to accept that sometimes it was the messy, chaotic moments that made everything worth it.